Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to Aldsidu. In this video, I'm going to discuss what a historical pre-Christian heathen bloat was. This is going to be a multi-part video as I have way too much material to present in just one video. And I'm going to present a rounded view. I'm going to present the evidence that proves my argument, but also some counter evidence, which would suggest that what I'm going to argue in this video is incorrect. So I'm going to give a full view on what historical pre-Christian heathen bloat was. Now, for those of you that want to pause this screen, I'm not going to read this screen, but this is coming from my blog on Heathen Blot. But I'm going to summarize it in this video. And basically, the Sagas I'm going to call more pro-Heathen sources. And the writings of Christians and Muslims like Adam of Bremen, Thietmar of Merseburg, Ibn Fadlan, Christian monks, Muslim men, I'm going to call the less pro-Heathen, or probably pro-monotheistic sources. Let's call them the pro-monotheistic sources. What I basically see is that the vast majority, not all, but the vast majority of the pro-Heathen Saga and Edda passages show that bloat was blood given to the gods, and the animal meat is eaten. But the more Christian or monotheistic sources show that it's like an animal or a human, like the whole thing, being sacrificed. Now, if you don't mind me saying, these sagas have blood splattered on trees at Uppsala, blood thrown on Hargr, which is altars made of stone, blood splattered in sacred groves, and blood splattered on the participants. But again, the monotheistic sources do not seem to show heathen sacrifice in the same manner. So, was bloat a sacrifice in the Abrahamic sense? I really don't think it was. Okay, but I'm going to present both sides, this other side in part 2 of this video. But nonetheless, I truly believe that Germanic and Scandinavian culture was completely different from Christian and Muslim and Jewish cultures. And these Germanic cultures and Scandinavian peoples or Germanic peoples, these people had different mindsets than the monotheistic world had. Hence, I prefer the term bloat to sacrifice, and sacrifice is a mistranslation. So we must relearn the meaning of this word, because today, in our Christian world, in the Christian West, when we hear the term sacrifice, the biblical definition of sacrifice immediately jumps into our head. And therefore, we need to erase our minds and think from the beginning, what is a pre-Christian heathen bloat? So here's what I call, from Heimskringla in chapter 16 in most translations of Håkon the Good, chapter 14 in some, but this is an example of a uuih, bloat, and Sumble. I take out the Sumble part in this quote, but it was an old custom, fornsither is the Icelandic, when they made a bloat for all the bonders to come to the cult house and bring their food, which they would need as long as the feast lasted. So pausing right there, they brought food. They brought food to the cult house. Hof is the Icelandic. Now back to the quote. At the feast, the men should all drink ale. This is also interesting because they're not drinking mead in this passage, they're drinking ale. So the idea that the Vikings only drank mead is not exactly a good one. There they slaughtered all kinds of cattle and horses, and the blood which flowed from them was called laut. The bowls in which the blood stood were called laut bowls and lautiner, which were made to sprinkle. With all this they should stain the stalls red, and likewise the cult house, walls inside and out, and likewise sprinkle it on all the people. The flesh was cooked as meat for the guest feast. So the question is, are the food that they're bringing here the cattle and horses they brought, or is it something different? It appears to me that the food that they're bringing is the cattle and the horses, which they then slaughter. They catch the blood in bowls, and they sprinkle them. Okay, they stain the stalls red and the cult house inside and outside. And they sprinkle it on all the men. The flesh, the meat was cooked as meat for the guest feast. So here, we don't show any meat given to the gods. The blood is given to the gods, and it's sprinkled all over the place. So let's go over some other passages. The poetic Edda states, he made a high Hargr, which is an altar, of heaped stones. The gathered rocks have grown all bloody, and he reddened them again with the fresh blood of cows. So here's a good example. What's being put on the altar? Is it meat or is it blood? Hervera Saga. A horse was then brought into the assembly and hewn in pieces and cut up for eating, and the sacred tree was smeared with blood. So it appears the meat is for eating, and the sacred tree is smeared with blood. Now, while most bloats I see in the sources occur outdoors, we do have some indoor evidence with words like bloat house, meaning bloat house. This, however, considering the passages above, this could mean hofs where the feasts were held that were sprinkled with blood. Also, we see in Old Saxon the word wincelli, which means wine hall. Celli is also in Scandinavian languages, though it's really sala. Our modern words salon and saloon come from this word, and so does the word Uppsala, which means upper hall. In the town there was the chief who was known as Odin, and it was a great place for bloat. It was the custom for 12 chief priests of the temple to direct the bloats and to judge between men. They were called Diar or Drotnar, and the people should follow and obey them. Ynglinga Saga chapter 2. In House Manuther, Harvest Moon, at winter nights, so we know winter nights was in House Manuther, there was a bloat at Lada, and there the king went. Formerly, when he was present, where there was a bloat, he had always wanted to hold a meal with a few men in a small house. So we see many passages where meals are accompanied with bloat. And here's one of my favorite passages, Olaf Saga Helga, chapter 72. In Sweden there was an old custom, another foreign sither, while they were heathens, that there should be a bloat in Uppsala during Goa, which is a moon. There they would bloat for peace and victory to their king. And there they would come from all over Sweden. There also were all the Swedish things. So, this is absolutely a victory bloat, because Sigurblot means victory bloat. Here's another passage on House Manuther. In House Manuther, King Olav was told these tidings from inner Trondheim, that the Bonders had a crowded feast on winter nights. So again, we have winter nights occurring in House Manuther. There was great drinking, and it was told that the king that they blessed all the bowls to the gods, after the old customs. Tales also followed, while cows and horses were slaughtered for bloat, and the stalls were dyed red with blood, and that a blood offering was made. And there followed also such talk that the offering was made for better seasons. So what is the offering in this passage? It's blood. And it appears that what's being eaten is the flesh of the cows and the horses. Also in the Saga of St. Orlov, later in the winter, the king was told that the inner Trons were holding a gathering at Mern, and that there was a great bloat in midwinter, when they were bloating for peace and good winter weather. The king brought a charge against the Bonders that they had held a midwinter bloat. This is what happens when Christianity is introduced, that the heathens start getting in trouble. Here's another great passage from the Saga of St. Orlov. As long as heathenry lasted, there was The people wanted to hold 3 bloats a year, 3 blood offerings, one on winter nights, a second at midwinter, and a third at the start of summer. But when he became a Christian, he kept up in the same way with the feasts. In the autumn he had a great feast of friends, then in winter a Yule feast, and then he asked many men to come to him again. And the third he had at Pascha, which is Easter, Passover, when he also had a great crowd of guests. So we have the Saga of St. Olaf saying the heathens, when heathenry lasted, there was 3 bloats a year. And we have the same in Ynglinga Saga, chapter 8. Odin established the same law in his land that had been enforced in Aslan. So this is a law that Odin is establishing. That there's 3 bloats a year on winter day, which is the first day of winter, which is in Haustmanuther, winter nights. There will be a bloat for a good year. This shows that winter nights is the bloat for a good year. It's the Norse New Year. And in the middle of winter, at midwinter, there's a bloat for a good crop. And the third bloat should be on summer day, which is the first day of summer. A victory bloat. So here's another great passage on bloat, Olaf Saga, Tryggvasonar. When Hakon the Jarl went north along the coast in the summer, and the people gave themselves up to him, he bade them to keep up the temples and bloats all over the land, and so it was done. So it is said in Valekla, the wise folk leader, now let the once harried lands of Thor and the gods be free for all men's use. The shield bearer brought home with honor his ship all across the sea. Him the gods lead, and friendly to men, the gods turn their minds to the bloat. The mighty shield-bearer thereby wins fame. Now grows the earth as of yore. Again the generous prince leads the glad men to build the gods' houses. This is a great passage because it appears to me that bloat and houses go together. I still believe the animals were probably sacrificed outdoors, but obviously Sumble happened, and the feast happened in the god houses after the bloat was done. Olaf Saga, Tryggvasonar, chapter 27. And when he came east along the Gautaskaries, if I'm pronouncing these words poorly, I apologize, I'm an American. He came to the land and he made there a great bloat. Then came flying there 2 ravens, and they screeched loudly. The Jarl seemed to know that Odin had taken the bloat well, and that now he would have good luck in battle. Another great passage, Olaf Saga, Tryggvasonar, chapter 53. But after Harald's death, his son Svein Folkbeard went soon on a raid both to Saxaland, that would be Old Saxony, and Friesland, and at last to England. So you can see that for those of us who are Old Saxon heathens, you can see that Saxon land is not the same as England. So who did the Vikings call the English? What did they call them? They called them English. English. But in Norway, those who had taken up Christianity fell back from performing bloats, as they had also done before the north of Ireland. So let me give some conclusions, as I've given many passages on bloat, and some of them don't even mention if the blood is being shared and if food is being shared, but some passages do imply that strongly. So let me give some conclusions. So part 1 suggests many passages, as in this video. Part 1 suggests many passages where bloat is sharing the blood with the gods, but eating the meat. Okay, and I do believe the skins would have been used for clothing. Okay, this is in stark contrast to the 2 historical sources of Adam of Bremen and Thietmar Mersberg. So, is bloat and a sacrifice 2 different things in heathen times? Or is bloat just bloat, and heathen bloat is very different from Christian sacrifice? Now, part 2 in this series, my second video, I'm going to show saga passages that imply that more than blood was given to the gods. I'm going to give some counter arguments to my own arguments. I do believe that mostly blood is shared with the gods. And there is going to be a part 3. How should we do bloat today? So this is part 1 of a 3-part series on bloat. So thank you so much for listening to this video. Please come visit us at www.aldsidu.com. And check out aldsidu.com/blog. We have around 110, 120 blog articles, which are full of saga and edda quotes. We quote historical sources here, there, up and down, and all around. And of course, like and subscribe. So thank you so much, and until next time, thanks again for supporting Aldsidu.